One of my favorite dudes out there, Connor O'Gara, joining us here on TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers, Rollo Insurance Studio. He's on the Brian Foley Law Hotline. What's up, bro? How you been?
I'm doing well, man. It feels like it's been a couple minutes here, but good to be back. Is there anything going on in College Station? Is there just like a couple of moves or anything that I should be aware of?
Well, look, man, I'm gonna explain the way I looked at the Jimbo era to where we are now, and because I think you were one of the first ones who eloquently and politely, at least when I started this gig, was against the Jimbo era. And when I say against, you just didn't think it was going the direction it should have gone. So the way I looked at it at the time was, he's getting all these, when you get this much talent, Ed Ogeron can win a national championship, right? You can't mess this up, but they messed it up. And I don't think it was until last season, I definitely had my doubts, the 22 season. I definitely had my doubts. I was like, just fix the freaking offense. Like, fix the offensive line. You're good. Once you fix the offensive line, you're good. And it didn't matter. The offensive line was never fixed, and here we are. But you saw that, I think, 3 or 4 years, even right after the Orange Bowl, you saw some flaws in the way he was going about his business. So I'll let you take it from there.
I'll be honest. After the Orange Bowl, I thought they were turning the corner with a few things. I thought that with the job that they did establishing an identity in that 2020 season, albeit a season with a lot of moving parts, and not to take away from A&M entirely, it is a little bit different to play on the road in the SEC when it's reduced crowds. Like, I think we can all look back and admit that. But there were still some cracks in the foundation from the standpoint of like, all right, how are we going to see this offense evolve? For the previous 3 years, Jimbo Fisher had one quarterback. Kellen Mond's durability is such an underrated thing in what he brought to the table, because we've seen it in the 3 years after that. It felt like A&M couldn't have a starting quarterback stay healthy. And how much of that is because your offense is too predictable, your offensive line that you thought was really good in 2020 because it had all that continuity in a year in which nobody had any continuity. Like, how much of this is going to be sustainable? And even when you have a talented offensive line like what they had this past year, you're looking up like, how is this group getting beat on a weekly basis? That shouldn't be happening. And that was the same stuff that we talked about at the end of the Jimbo Fisher era at Florida State. So, yeah, I mean, I think we can all pick and choose different spots in which we could say, well, this wasn't working here, that wasn't working there. But reality is, when you got 6 years, you've got enough time, and you can't just have that one good season that makes you feel like, all right, this thing is going in the right direction.
Well, I think the first 3 years were a little bit of a climb, right? You win 9 that first year. I think you win 8 the next year, then you win the 9 out of 10 games. But since then, train wreck. I feel like Elko's the right guy. He says the right things. He's got that blue-collar mentality. He's doing some things different than Jimbo did already. He understands the issues inside and out. Now, recruits may not feel that same way right now, right? Like that part's up in the air. But I think if he gets the right transfer dudes in here, they can have a pretty solid season next year. What do you think from what you've seen so far from Mike Elko?
I don't think I've ever said anything negative about Mike Elko. I don't think I have. Today's not the day in which that's going to start. When this search began, I was kind of hoping that Elko would be the guy. And of course, because of the way that the last hire played out, you still have to open up yourself to the possibility that maybe it is going to be Lane Kiffin. Maybe they will make a big swing and go after Dan Lanning. I think that still there was a part of me that wanted to see Mike Elko come back to College Station, because I loved the things that he did in the 4 years there. And I thought it was so vastly under discussed, nationally at least, how good that defense was. And I think even in 2021, where that offense was a disaster, but why were they still able to win 8 games? Because they're the number 3 defense in the country. And Mike Elko did that year over year. And the fact that in the 2 years that he spent at Duke, he won more games than A&M did in that 2-year stretch, it showed you this guy knows how to build a program. He knows how to develop talent. He's going to put guys in the right spot on the defensive side of the ball. And I think, to me, that hire made a lot of sense. Now, TBD on whether or not he's going to continue to make the right moves. You still got to, know how to handle quarterback battles, and when to fire a coordinator, and when to adapt here, and when to do this there, and when to, you got to be able to hit in the portal these days. But, I like what I've seen so far, just from the simple fact of bringing in Colin Klein is a move that, if you could have told me Mike Elko is going to make one coordinator hire and go after a guy like That's on the short list of the 2 or 3 that I would pick. If you could pick anybody in the country and he went out and got him. So I like what I've seen so far from Elko, and I continue to sing his praises.
Makes sense of this temporary restraining order there where transfers are going to be, you can be a multi-transfer athlete right now. Like it's just, Olin made a comment earlier, I think it was before the show, but has the NCAA ever won a court case? Do they ever win anything? And here we are again, for the next few weeks at least. You can transfer as much as you want, guys.
Yeah, it's difficult. I'm actually, before I hopped on this call, I'm in the midst of a very deep dive into the guys in the 2021 class and 2022 class in college football and how many of them have transferred. How many of those top 100 recruits from each of those 2 classes that have transferred? And then I did the breakdown in the SEC of how many of those blue chip recruits, 4-star and 5-star guys, have transferred. Because I think it's a little bit too soon to look at the class of 2023 because those guys are technically only like a semester into college, even though they enrolled early. And it's fascinating. And obviously A&M was gutted by the transfer portal in those 2 classes, and the amount of talent that they lost, especially from that historic 2022 class, is well documented. But it's college football wide. And so my entire point, and the reason that I wanted to look into these numbers, is because if you're going to be sitting here at this time next week bummed about your team's class in the early signing period from the high school level, I would say don't be as bummed. And if you're super excited, I would say don't be as excited, because half of these guys about at the blue chip level are transferring, and they're not even getting to that place where you're like, oh, we're going to see this guy, on the field, and he's going to be a potential all-conference player for us. So it's something to keep in mind for A&M as well. If you're disappointed with this class and you're looking around, know that the transfer portal has taken on such a more important role in recruiting, and the early signing period is kind of taking a back seat.
Connor, let's. I read your column, I think 3 days ago, on the coaches in the hot seat in the SEC. Let's kind of take them piece by piece, because I think it's interesting. Sam Pittman survived. Obviously makes a splash hire there with OC. If you think Petrino's a splash hire, Shane Beamer, a guy that a year ago today everyone's like, oh, watch out, they're the team. Billy Napier, they're the team, and they got a brutal schedule. So just take it from there.
I consider Bobby Petrino a splash hire. I do. He's a splash wherever he goes. Robert Patrick Petrino, of course he is. And look, he improved the A&M offense. I mean, let's be honest. It was a better product to be able to watch. And I love what Jalen Henderson became in that offense. I think that guy is just an absolute gamer, and he was fun to watch with Petrino with the controls. Look, I find myself wondering, are all 4 of those coaches, and I'll include Clark Lee in that group, because I think when you go winless in SEC play in year 3, it's definitely something that an athletic director has to take into account, even if the bar is extremely low at a place like Vandy. I find myself wondering if all 4 of those coaches are just already kind of in a rough spot. And for lack of a better word, I think they're kind of screwed. I do. And I look around at the transfer portal, and when Sam Pittman is losing a Rocket Sanders and TBD on KJ Jefferson, and you're looking at Billy Napier's situation, Nick De La Torre had the tweet where half of his first signing class has already hit the portal. Like, that should be your foundation. That should be going into year 3. And Billy Napier is looking up at what everybody's calling the most difficult schedule in the history of Power 5 football. I mean, they have more teams at the Power 5 level that clinch bowl eligibility this year that are going to be on that upcoming schedule than that 2019 LSU schedule in a 15-game slate. Like, it is that brutal. And then, you could look at a place like South Carolina. I was singing their praises. I thought they had a potential to be second in the East. And if their portal budget's going to be kind of limited with all the roster holes that they had this past year, like, how's Shane Beamer going to find his way out of that in year 4? So, yeah, I think it's more difficult than ever for some of these groups to be able to retain the talent that they want. And Vandy is a prime example. I mean, they've just been absolutely gutted by the portal. So, yeah, it's just a really difficult go for a lot of these teams in the SEC.
Connor, last thing for you. Jim Harbaugh, you think he ends up in the NFL next year?
I'm hoping that he ends up with my Chicago Bears right there.
All right.
I'm hoping. Look, it just never works out this way for the Bears. It just doesn't. And if he doesn't end up there, could he end up with the Chargers? Yeah. I think he does. And I was talking to Jake Butt, the former Mackey Award winner who played at Michigan. He does a great job on the Big Ten Network now. And he's like, yeah, I mean, it does kind of feel like a bit of a last dance, so to speak. And there is a vibe that this group is going to have a lot of turnover. And, we don't know yet what that turnover is going to look like from a coaching staff standpoint. But I do think that there are going to be people that are kind of like, man, how do you come back when you don't know the NCAA restrictions that he could have? And if he's facing yet another suspension, you're like, what in the world are we getting ourselves into if we're Michigan? So it could just be the time in which both parties say, you know what, let's just go our separate ways, start over, appreciate the work that you did do here, and move on and know that the program is at a better place than when you inherited it.
Connor, I appreciate you, brother. Thanks so much, man.
Appreciate it, man.